Like, comment, and subscribe, because stories like this don't let go once they start, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The call came in just before dawn, when the city still pretended to be asleep. A jogger had found the body beneath the riverside overpass, wedged between concrete pillars where the river narrowed and the noise of traffic drowned out everything else. No blood, no weapon, no signs of a struggle. Just a man lying on his back, eyes open, jacket neatly folded beneath his head, as if someone had taken the time to make him comfortable. Detective Aaron Keller stood at the edge of the scene, watching the water slide past like it knew something he didn't. 20 years in homicide had taught him one thing. The cleanest crime scenes were often the most dangerous. This one was spotless in a way that felt deliberate. The victim was identified within hours. Daniel Mercer, 38, financial analyst, recently divorced. No criminal record. No enemies that anyone could name out loud. The kind of man who vanished into spreadsheets and quiet routines, unnoticed until he didn't come home. The medical examiner delivered the first blow to the investigation. Cause of death, asphyxiation. Time of death, sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. No bruising. No defensive wounds. No fibers. No DNA under the fingernails. It was a death without fingerprints, without proof, without a story. That was when the pressure started. Mercer's phone was missing. His wallet was still in his pocket. His car sat unlocked in his apartment garage. Whoever brought him to the river wanted him there, but didn't want to leave themselves behind. Keller's team retraced Mercer's final hours. Security footage showed him leaving his office late, shoulders hunched against the cold, speaking on the phone with someone who made him stop walking. He stood there for almost a minute, listening. Then he turned around and headed back toward the building. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. The call logs led to one name that refused to go away. Lucas Reed, former friend, former business partner, former everything. Their partnership had collapsed a year earlier under accusations of stolen clients and vanished money. The lawsuit was still crawling through the courts, slow and bitter. Reed didn't run. He didn't lawyer up. He answered the door in socks and a wrinkled T-shirt, blinking like a man genuinely surprised by the knock. He admitted to calling Mercer that night, said they argued, said Mercer was paranoid, unstable, accused him of things that didn't make sense anymore. Reed claimed he ended the call and went to bed. No witnesses. No alibi. Still, there was nothing physical tying Reed to the river. No footage. No GPS data. No trace evidence. The case should have stalled right there. Instead, it accelerated. Mercer's sister told police Daniel had been afraid, that he believed someone was watching him. She handed over emails, dozens of them, sent in the weeks before his death. They weren't threats. They were fragments, warnings without names. If something happens to me, one message read, look at who had the most to gain. The media pounced. Headlines screamed about a murder with no evidence. Talk shows speculated. Online forums convicted Reed before the investigation finished its first week. Then came the detail no one could explain. Detectives searched Mercer's apartment again, this time more slowly. In the back of a hall closet, behind winter coats and old boxes, they found a locked metal case. Inside were printed bank statements, handwritten notes, and a single document stamped with a court seal. It wasn't proof of murder, but it was proof of motive, and it meant someone had been lying long before Daniel Mercer ever reached the river. The document from the metal case changed the temperature of the room. It was a sealed financial arbitration ruling, never publicly filed, detailing a private judgment against Lucas Reed. According to the paperwork, an independent panel had concluded Reed diverted millions from a joint investment fund, money that belonged at least in part to Daniel Mercer. The ruling ordered restitution. Quietly, quickly, before reputations collapsed. But restitution never came. Instead, Mercer withdrew the complaint days later. No explanation, no settlement on record, just silence. Detective Keller didn't like silence. Silence meant leverage. Reed was brought in again, this time to a smaller interview room with a camera that hummed like an insect. He looked different now. Tired, eyes rimmed red, the calm confidence of the first interview gone. Keller slid the document across the table and watched Reed read it, watched his jaw tighten, watched the calculation flicker behind his eyes. "You were facing financial ruin," Keller said, evenly. "Mercer had proof. He backed off. Then he ends up dead." Reed shook his head. "That paper doesn't say what you think it says." "It says motive," Keller replied. "And motive is where cases like this start." Reed insisted Mercer had changed his mind, that he'd realized the ruling was flawed, that the money in question had never existed the way it was described. He said Mercer called him that night not to threaten, but to apologize, to ask for peace. There were no witnesses to that apology, no recording, just Reed's word. The prosecution saw something else. They built a case not on what could be touched, but on what could be inferred. Phone records placed Reed as the last person to speak with Mercer. Traffic cameras showed Reed's car crossing the bridge near the river that night, never stopping, never slowing, but present all the same. A financial analyst testified that Mercer's death benefited Reed immediately. The arbitration ruling died with him. The jury watched grainy footage and listened to carefully chosen words. They heard about a friendship turned bitter, about money and pride, about desperation dressed up as opportunity. The defense countered with absence. No DNA, no fibers, no eyewitnesses, no murder weapon. They reminded the jury that proximity was not proof, that silence was not confession. They asked a simple question: how could a man commit the perfect crime in a city covered in cameras and leave nothing behind? But the prosecution had something more dangerous than evidence. They had a story. They painted Reed as a man backed into a corner, facing exposure and collapse. A man who made one call, lured his former partner out, and chose a place where the city's noise would swallow everything else. They didn't need to show how it happened. They only needed to convince the jury it could have. As the trial stretched on, pressure mounted. Mercer's family sat in the front row every day, quiet and unmoving. Reed's supporters dwindled. Even his own attorney began speaking with caution, as if afraid certainty itself had become suspicious. Then, halfway through the third week, something unexpected happened. A clerk from the courthouse came forward with an email, one she almost deleted. It had been sent to Mercer the night he died, minutes before Reed's call. No sender name, no return address, just one line of text. "Don't meet him. He's not your biggest problem." The prosecution dismissed it as irrelevant. The defense seized on it like oxygen. If someone else had warned Mercer, someone else had knowledge, someone else had motive. Keller felt the case tilt, just slightly, enough to make him uneasy. Because the question was no longer whether Reed could have done it. It was whether the jury would believe he had to. And behind the scenes, a second truth was beginning to surface, one that suggested Daniel Mercer's secrets extended far beyond a failed partnership. The jury deliberated for 2 days. No cameras, no leaks, just 12 people alone with a story that felt complete, even if the pieces didn't quite touch. Outside the courthouse, rain fell in thin, relentless sheets. Detective Keller stood under the awning, listening to reporters speculate about a verdict that seemed already decided. The case had become a lesson in narrative. No blood, no weapon, just motive, opportunity, and the quiet pressure of doubt shaped into certainty. When the jury returned, they did not look at Lucas Reed. They looked straight ahead. Guilty. The word landed softly, but it echoed. Reed didn't react at first. Then his shoulders dropped, as if something essential had finally given way. He was sentenced weeks later, the judge acknowledging the lack of physical evidence, but emphasizing the overwhelming logical conclusion drawn from the circumstances. The case closed. Officially, but Keller couldn't let it go. The anonymous email gnawed at him. So did the withdrawn arbitration complaint. He began digging into Mercer's finances, this time not as a victim, but as a man with choices. What he found didn't fit the image presented at trial. Mercer had been quietly cooperating with regulators. Not about Reed, but about a larger network of offshore accounts tied to a consulting firm with political clients and international reach. The arbitration ruling wasn't leverage. It was protection. Mercer had been buying time. And someone knew. 3 months after Reed's conviction, a storage unit on the outskirts of the city was auctioned for non-payment. Inside were boxes of documents, encrypted drives, and a burner phone wrapped in plastic. The buyer thought it was junk. The name on the lease stopped Keller cold. Daniel Mercer. The phone, once unlocked, revealed messages that never made it to trial. Mercer arranging meetings. Mercer expressing fear. Mercer naming a contact he trusted to handle things if anything went wrong. That contact was not Lucas Reed. Keller brought the discovery to the prosecutor. It was reviewed, discussed, filed away. There was no appetite for reopening a case that had already delivered closure. The conviction stood. Appeals moved slowly. The system, once satisfied, preferred stillness. Reed learned about the storage unit through his attorney. It changed nothing. The courts ruled the evidence inconclusive, the timing uncertain, the implication speculative. Beyond reasonable doubt had already been decided. Years passed. The consulting firm dissolved quietly after a foreign investigation exposed financial crimes unrelated, officially, to Mercer's death. Names surfaced. No charges followed. The river flowed on, unchanged. On the anniversary of the verdict, Keller returned to the overpass at dawn. He watched the water move and wondered how many truths could exist beneath the surface without ever rising. The jury had done what juries do. They chose the story that made the most sense. They filled the gaps with logic and belief. They convicted without fingerprints, without witnesses, without proof that could be held in a hand. They convicted beyond reasonable doubt. Whether they convicted the right person was a question the system no longer asked. If this story pulled you into the shadows where certainty lives and truth sometimes doesn't, stay with us. Subscribe for more stories that refuse to let go.